Hi, my name is Tyler Sadler, and I'm here with Miguel Martinez. Miguel Martinez is an entrepreneur from Puerto Rico who moved to New York when he was 8 years old. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Tyler. And
Um, to begin, I want to start off by talking about your childhood. So, how was that like?
uh, my childhood was, it was cool. I was always very inquisitive and adventurous, even as a little child. Um, and it was challenging as well because I found that I had gotten into a lot of fights, either because of where I was from or what I looked like. But that was the tough part, but that was very little of it. Most of it was centered around family and sports.
Okay,
And so it was, I would, rank it as being a pretty cool childhood.
okay. So, for the viewers who don't know, where are you from?
Okay, originally from Rio Piedras, Puerto Rico, and we moved here. I'm going to correct him a little bit. I moved here when I was a baby, before I could even remember. But then my family moved. I went back to Puerto Rico for 1 year of school, the second grade, and then we moved back to New York. And my family stayed here. Most of my family stayed here ever since.
Okay, so when did you first learn English? Did you learn English when you were in Puerto Rico? Or did you learn English?
No, I learned English here, and I picked up a little English, but I definitely know that Spanish was my first language, and I remember kind of picking up English when I was somewhere around 3, 4 years old,
Okay.
conversationally.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I knew English words naturally being in New York as a child, but I wasn't fully conversational until I was school age, basically.
Okay. So, what about your siblings? Did they learn it at the same time as you or
Yeah,
different times?
everybody, all of us there are five of us,
Oh, okay.
and all of our first languages were Spanish. But now, uh, I would say for my younger brother and sister, who were born here,
Mm-hmm.
they were exposed probably to more English than I was, but Spanish was all of our first language. And then as we got closer to school, um, my parents wanted us to be fully fluent in English as
And in
well as
Spanish.
Spanish.
Okay. So, how about your parents? Were they originally from Puerto Rico or were they from the U.S.?
Actually, my mother is originally from Puerto Rico,
Okay.
and my father is of Cuban descent, although he was born in Tampa, Florida.
Okay. When you moved back to the U.S. When you were 8, how was the language barrier when you came back?
Well, it was pretty interesting because when I moved to Puerto Rico, um, uh, my fluency in Spanish wasn't what it should be. For someone who's been living there
Right.
and had already spent a couple of years in school there. So that first year, they actually held me back for a portion of the year,
Wow.
and so I caught on quickly because it wasn't that big of a transition. They just had to make sure I was ready. But coming back, the interesting thing was that I developed, I had to take speech classes in
Okay.
English because uh, I just developed, I was just taking speech classes and I didn't know why. I thought I spoke well. I did know that I was a stutterer. And so, in terms of language,
Mm-hmm.
they kind of I was able to fix the stuttering in English, but naturally they couldn't do it for me in Spanish
Wow.
because
Okay.
there are different vowels that you use and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually took me much longer to fix, meaning the Spanish part.
Right.
But I would imagine as I remember those classes, I remember them focusing big time on pronunciation. So I speak very good English now
Right.
because those classes literally uh, taught my tongue, through images and repetition on how to pronounce English words correctly.
Okay.
So it was a blessing because a lot of my Latino, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican friends, a lot of them kind of never lost um, that accent that you hear. A lot of Latinos, even though they've been here for their whole lives,
Right.
they still speak with an accent as if they've only been here for a few years. So I would say that those speech classes helped me tremendously.
Good. So when you moved from first grade to second grade from Puerto Rico to the U.S. and back, um, was there a culture shock, or when you came back to the U.S. was it just everything was good? Was it smooth?
Well, it was, yeah, well, the culture shock first happened in Puerto Rico because me being Puerto Rican, because I told people and they knew that I had just arrived back from New York.
Right.
Uh, I got guys would pick fights with me, making fun of me, and that was a shock because I'm like, it was almost like they had animosity because I had lived in New York, and that was strange. So I got into a number of fights until guys stopped bothering me, till I could prove myself. But the culture shock to me was that I was being treated differently because I'd spent some time in New York.
Right.
And coming back to New York, I think the culture shock more was initially, even though all of my family was in Spanish Harlem.
Okay.
And so that was my culture. And then coming back and going to school, we were in West Harlem. And let me put it to you this way. I'd lived in West Harlem, but didn't realize I lived in West Harlem because we were always in Spanish Harlem,
Okay.
on the east side of Harlem.
Right.
So now I'm coming back and I'm going to school in West Harlem, and I recognize it. And so there was a culture shock because there were very, very few, there were far fewer Latino families on the west side of Harlem.
Okay.
So that's when I got exposed to other cultures, principally African American cultures, and that was my first time actually even interacting, with Caucasian Americans.
Okay.
Because the area where we lived on the west side was close to Columbia University, so they had a pretty big Irish population over there as well. And Columbia University students, which were principally all white, did live in the area as well. So there was a bit of shock there and getting used to, because I became exposed to these other cultures that I was unaccustomed to.
Right.
Different food, different language, and then again, I was still considered like this Puerto Rican kid, and I had to go through proving myself, and
Right.
and all of that,
Right.
until I developed solid friendships, and it eventually that period lasted maybe 2 years.
Okay. So, do you think that you have more family in Puerto Rico or in the U.S.?
In the U.S. now,
Okay.
my family, we come from a thoroughbred racing family.
Okay.
One of my cousins is a 3-time Kentucky Derby winner.
Wow.
My grandfather was a very esteemed Puerto Rican jockey, as my uncles and my cousins. And so they just began to move to the U.S. and populated in New York principally, but then the racing business is principally New York, California, and then also in Kentucky. So us being Afro-Latinos, we love color. So it was more natural that my family, that wanted to, and a lot of my family chose to move to California as opposed to moving to Kentucky. Because you know, back then, there were Jim Crow laws, it was the racial segregation in America. I actually was lawfully segregated down south, and my family didn't want to participate in living in any environment like that. So eventually, I have a little family in Puerto Rico, but I would say
Okay.
that more than 90% of us are in the United States.
Okay. Are they scattered around in Puerto Rico, or are they in one town?
Um, from my understanding, it's like the same area. The area is San Juan, and so where you have most of us who are Afro-Latino, we are on the eastern part of the island, San Juan. So you have like where I'm from, Rio Piedras, but Rio Piedras, my mother's from Santurce. All of those towns sit right next to each other.
Okay.
So you have that, Loíza, Carolina, where my grandfather's from. So our family is still centered in that area.
Okay. So now that you are an entrepreneur now, do you think that you being from Puerto Rico played a bigger part of you becoming who you are today? Or do you think that you've coming into the U.S. and learning those values of what it is to have the American dream, do you think that had a bigger part to you becoming an entrepreneur?
Yes, because the way I looked at it was my grandparents chose to first come, and my family came for a better life, for more opportunity.
Right.
It didn't turn out to be that way initially because my mother she grew up very affluent in Puerto Rico. So when we first came here was when my family began to experience, I'm not going to say poverty, but we didn't live at the same level. Just coming here, we were a prominent Puerto Rican family. And so coming here, now we're in East Harlem, which
Right.
at the time, was a ghetto. Like, let's be honest. And that's where, you had Latinos on one end and you had, African Americans on the other. There were some parts of it that were Italian as well. But I would say yes, because it was a matter of us becoming something.
Okay.
And them making the sacrifice for us to be here,
Right.
so that I could participate and potentially build a bigger life for myself here than what I could in Puerto Rico. And the fact that and I'm going to say emigrated here, a lot of people say, well, Puerto Rico is part of the United States, but you still have the same immigrant experience.
Right.
When you come here, you're not necessarily treated, and we could see right now, like with Hurricane Maria, that Puerto Ricans are still not fully regarded from in a legal sense.
That is true.
We are American citizens,
Right.
but from an actual sense, we experience the same experience as other immigrants from other places, certainly other Latin American countries. But I'm saying that to say that these experiences, having to expose myself and knowing that I had to learn about other cultures and really get to learn those people,
Right.
Other people, that entrepreneurship was basically me going out and establishing something for me and my family, and having greater control over my economic, my economic destiny. But it's also motivated by the fact that I have a very strong sense of racial and ethnic pride. And quite frankly, I'm motivated by the fact that I had people who look like me as well, who
Right.
champion me and got behind me and supported me and helped to build me. And so I want to build a legacy so that kids who grew up like me and my brothers and sisters will just have another role model. I just
Right.
want to be a role model and leave something, that people, build something that people can be proud of. Not just leave something, but build something that people can be proud of. So, having had the experience of, getting on airplanes and traveling to another place several times, also motivated me as a kid. I was very athletic
Okay.
to to excel athletically because I had to change. So I was like, I was going to get on the travel team. And so it made me just excel and really commit myself, to doing it. And so what that did for me was it embedded in me that just like I committed myself to making these traveling teams, and you played sports, is very active. You know that it brings the best out of you,
Right.
and you have to sometimes dig deep and look for things. So at times when you are so in terms of you accomplish things at a young age, and it never leaves you. At least it didn't leave me. It just I could always refer it back to, well, what did I have to do when I wanted to make that team, or what did I have to do when I didn't make that team, or when I was at the end of the bench and I wanted to start, be on the starting five, something
Right.
like that. So you generate that, and so that pushes you on in entrepreneurship because you are pretty much following a vision that you have, and at the beginning nobody believes in you but yourself, and you push, you stay focused, you dedicate yourself, and you find parts of yourself that you didn't know that you had. And in doing that, you find, like when I was young, I'd find this coach, or I'd find this older ball player,
Right.
or I'd find people that would mentor me, and it's turned out to be the same in business.
Right. So my last question: do you have any advice for younger kids who have a similar situation, the way you grew up?
Yeah. To the young kids, I would tell them to number one, don't be afraid to follow your dreams, uh, and that despite what naysayers may say, despite what uh, it may look like on the outside, like you just have to believe that you can do what you want to do. Most importantly, what my mother embedded in me when I was 5, 6 years old, I saw a television show, and I saw people who were living beyond our means. And I asked my mother, what it would take, because I saw we weren't living at that standard. And she told me that I would have to get a good education and go to college. And I thought, okay, well, I'll do that. She said, but there's one thing, I don't have the resources, and college costs money. She said, but anything that you set your mind and heart to, you can do it.
That is true.
You're from a great family, that there's nobody that's been born to this planet that's born any greater than you. That God makes the sun shine the same on me as he's done on anybody who's ever lived. So whatever I set my heart and mind to, I can accomplish it. Yes, there are going to be obstacles. My specific one, she said, is you're Puerto Rican, so you're going to get flack because of that from white people and even black people who don't know you. You're going to obviously get flack from white people also because you're of Afro descent. She said, but do not let it stop you. Do not let it stop you.
Right.
And so with that mindset, I would just say to anybody who started like me to have that belief in themselves, and also realize that God doesn't discriminate. God doesn't discriminate. And so the same way the sun shines on people who you think have it better, the sun also shines on you. And with every day, we have an opportunity, to become who we want to become. We just have to get fixed on what it is that we really want. And then we just have to take the time and seek his face and just go at it day after day. So pick something that you love to do. And don't just, in my opinion, grow up to say, oh, all I want to do is just, get any job. Because you're not going to be happy. And that causes a lot of things. You find people wind up getting certain addictions because they just live for the weekend. So if you stop and think about it, if you're going to spend 8 to 10 hours a day, and let's just assume it's a normal 8-hour day with an hour to get to work, an hour to get back, right? So that's 10 hours. So if you put that in, that's almost half of your day, which is about equal to 40% of your life. Mm-hmm. Remember, you're going to spend a third of your life sleeping. So make sure that with that 40% of your whole life, that is something that you're about. And don't think about money, just think about how you were made and the impact and the footprint that you want to put, on the world. Mm-hmm. And just go at it with faith and perseverance.
Well, with that being said, it was great speaking to you, and hope we speak again next time.